Welcome students to the another session of life processes. Today we will study about respiration. Let us start with what respiratory system does. Respiratory system allows animals to move oxygen into body tissues and remove carbon dioxide from the cells. Respiratory organs. Mechanism of breathing vary among different groups of animals depending mainly on their habitats and level of organization. Habitats means the place where the animals or any living organisms live. For example, there are organisms that live in water, those are aquatic animals. The level of organization means the tissue levels that have been developed. Now, let us see the flatworm. In flatworm, almost all the cells of these organisms are exposed with the surroundings. So, the exchange of gases easily takes place by the simple process of diffusion. This is a sponge. Even over here, you can see that all the cells are of almost the same type. The exchange of gases here also takes place by the simple process of diffusion. Different types of organisms have different type of structures for respiration. The earthworm has an outer layer made up of cuticle, which is above the epidermis. This cuticle layer remains moist. This helps in exchange of gases from the atmosphere and the tissues of the earthworm. Insects have spiracles. Spiracles are pores that are found on the body of the insects. This leads to the tubes that are found inside and into the passages inside the insect. Respiration takes place with the help of diffusion. This is a fish. It is an aquatic animal. Only 4% of oxygen dissolves in water. So, fishes and many other aquatic animals absorb this oxygen from water by the simple process of diffusion. When water moves over the gills, exchange of gases takes place. CO2 will be released out and oxygen will enter inside the cell. The amount of dissolved oxygen is fairly low compared to the amount of oxygen in the air. The rate of breathing in aquatic organisms is much faster than seen in the terrestrial organisms. Fishes take in water through their mouth and force it past the gills where the dissolved oxygen is taken by the blood. Terrestrial organisms use oxygen in the atmosphere for respiration. This oxygen is absorbed by different organs in different animals. All these organs have specialized structure that increases the surface area which is in contact with the oxygen-rich atmosphere. Since the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide has to take place across this surface is very fine and delicate. In order to protect this surface, it is usually placed within the body. So there have to be passages that will take air to this area. There is a mechanism for moving the air in and out of this area where the oxygen is absorbed. So, the amount of oxygen requirement by a different organism is quite different. We as mammals, we require more energy and therefore the oxygen requirement is more for us. Human respiratory system. All mammals have lungs for the purpose of respiration and this is known as pulmonary respiration. The mammalian respiratory system is mainly made up of nasal cavity. The nasal cavity has got an opening outside and those are called as nares, N-A-R-E-S, nares. This nasal cavity then leads into the pharynx. Pharynx is a common site for both food and air. From the pharynx, the food enters into the larynx. Larynx is a cartilaginous box. There we produce sound because of the muscles present in the larynx. The opening of larynx is called as glottis, and above the glottis there is a flap that is called as epiglottis. This epiglottis prevents the food to enter into the larynx. The food goes into the esophagus, that is behind the trachea. From the larynx, the air enters into the trachea. This is also muscular in nature. Then it divides into two bronchi and enters into the left lung and the right lung. Each bronchus then divides into bronchioles, and the ending of the bronchioles have got air chambers, and they are called as alveoli. Alveoli is a site of exchange of gases. Let us talk about the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity lies dorsal to the mouth. It opens up with a pair of external nostrils or nares. Bones and cartilages support the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is divided into two parts by a nasal septum. The cavity opens into the pharynx through two internal nostrils. So we have got two nostrils. One is external nostrils that you can see outside, and one are internal nostrils. Air while passing through the nasal cavity is filtered, and only the clean air free from dust particles and foreign substances enters the pharynx. Nasal cavity has hairs which increases the surface area and mucus that helps to filter the air. The air also gets warmed and moistened in this chamber. Nasopharynx. The nasal chamber opens into nasopharynx, which is a portion of pharynx, the common passage for food and air. Larynx. Larynx is a cartilaginous box which helps in sound production, and hence it is also called as sound box. During swallowing, glottis can be covered by a thin cartilaginous flap called as epiglottis to prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Trachea. It is a tube starting from the larynx, running through the neck and the thoracic cavity. The trachea runs through the neck in front of the esophagus. It is about 12 centimeters long, and it divides at the fifth thoracic vertebra into the right and left bronchi. The two bronchi then enters into the right and left lungs, and each bronchus undergoes repeated divisions to form bronchioles, ending up into the last part, that is the terminal bronchioles. Alveoli. Each terminal bronchioles give rise to number of very thin, irregular walled and vascularized bag-like structure called as alveoli. The branching network of bronchi, bronchioles and alveoli comprises the lungs. You can see the trachea, above the trachea, they are fully muscular in nature. This is again bronchus, bronchioles. Now these all have half ring, that is C-shaped rings. The rings are not completely round, they are only C-shaped rings that are present over here. This ensures that the air passage does not collapse. We have two lungs and they are covered by layers, and between the two layers there is a fluid that helps to reduce the friction. The outer surface of this membrane is in close contact with the thoracic lining, and the inner part is in close contact with the lungs. Here again you will see this is an epiglottis. It is a flap that covers the opening over here. This is a voice box. You can see the shape over here, the voice box. It is also called as larynx. Then is a trachea. From trachea, these are rings. They are not complete rings. They are incomplete, and we call it as C-shaped rings. And this whole trachea then divides into two bronchi. Even over the bronchi, you can see that there are rings present over here. And now you can see the position of the heart. It is between the two lungs, and it is slightly towards the left side. There is a constriction on the left side of the lungs. Below the lungs is again a muscle that is called as diaphragm. Now, who helps in breathing? Which muscles helps in breathing? They are the diaphragm. It is also a muscle that is found below the lungs. Then there are muscles that are found between the ribs. These are ribs, and in between the ribs there are muscles. They also helps in breathing. They also helps in lifting the chest, ribs, and also to bring back the chest ribs to the normal position by the process of breathing. Lungs. The parts starting with the external nostrils up to the terminal bronchioles constitute the conducting part. Conducting part means here the air passage either goes inside or outside. Oxygen rich air enters inside and carbon dioxide rich air goes outside. This part is called as conducting part. The main place where exchange of gases takes place is the alveoli. So the conducting part transports the atmospheric air to the alveoli. It also helps to clear the foreign particles. It also humidifies it and brings the air to the body temperature. Exchange part is the actual site of diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the blood and the atmospheric air. The lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber, which is anatomically an airtight chamber. The thoracic chamber is formed dorsally by the vertebral column. So on the back of the lungs are the vertebral column. On the front side of the lungs is the sternum, that is a ventral side. Ribs are located on the lateral side, and the lower side is a dome-shaped diaphragm. The anatomical setup of lungs in the thorax is such that any change in the volume of the thoracic cavity will be reflected in the lung cavity, and this arrangement helps in breathing. Respiration involves the following step. First, breathing or the pulmonary ventilation, by which the atmospheric air is drawn in and carbon dioxide rich alveolar air is released out. Then diffusion takes place across the alveolar membrane. Transport of gas takes place by the blood. Then diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide takes place between the blood and tissues. And utilization of oxygen by the cells for the catabolic reactions, that is respiration we call, and the resultant release is that of carbon dioxide. Breathing is very important to us. We require oxygen to break down our nutrients so that we can get energy. During this process, carbon dioxide is released, and this is a harmful gas for us. Therefore, we have to remove this carbon dioxide out from our body. And therefore, it is very evident that oxygen has to be continuously provided to the cell and carbon dioxide has to be released out. What is breathing? Breathing means it is an exchange of gases. Which gases? Oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen from the atmosphere with carbon dioxide that is produced from the cells. During the process of breathing, as I told you earlier, the diaphragm plays a very important role. Along with the diaphragm, there are muscles that are found in the ribs. They also play a very important role in breathing. You can see this is a process of breathing in. Breathing in is taking place, and this is a process of breathing out. In this figure, as you see, what is the size of the lung? The size of the lung is definitely more in the breathing in than breathing out. That means the volume of air during the breathing in process is more over here, and the volume of air is less during the breathing out process. That means breathing in, we are taking large amount of air inside, and breathing out, we are taking out air. During this time, it is not that when we breathe out, all the air is pushed out, is moved out. A residual volume of air always remains in the lungs. So now let us start to understand how breathing takes place. You can see the shape of the diaphragm. It is straight over here. So during breathing in, the diaphragm contracts, the chest expands, and breathing in takes place. During breathing out, the diaphragm forms a dome shaped. That is why it pushes the lungs upward. When it pushes the lungs upward, the chest contracts and the air moves outside. This is called as breathing out. Breathing involves two stages. One is called as inspiration and expiration. During the process of inspiration, the atmospheric air is drawn in. During the process of expiration, the alveolar air is released out. And this process is done because there is change in pressure gradient between the lungs and the atmosphere. Inspiration can occur if the pressure within the lung is less than the atmospheric pressure. That means the pressure outside the atmospheric pressure is more and the pressure that is found inside the lung is less. So air moves from a region of high pressure zone to a lower pressure zone, and therefore the air that is rich in oxygen enters inside the lungs. Similarly, expiration also takes place, and that is also because of the change in atmospheric pressure. The atmospheric pressure is less than the pressure that is found inside the lungs. That means air has to move out from the lungs to the surroundings, and that is how expiration takes place. The diaphragm and specialized set of muscles between the ribs, they helps in changes of such pressure. So during inspiration, what happens? The diaphragm becomes straight, contracted, the ribs are raised, and the air moves inside because the atmospheric pressure is more than the pressure that is found inside the lungs. You can see the lung volume also increases. Now, during expiration, the diaphragm becomes dome shaped and the ribs and sternums return back to their original position and the air is expelled from the lungs. On an average, a healthy human breathes 12 to 16 times per minute. The lung volumes are also known as respiratory volumes. It refers to the volume of gas in the lungs at a given time during the respiratory cycle. A number of the lung volumes can be measured by spirometry. Tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, and expiratory reserve volume. You can see over here, a patient takes a deep breath and blows as hard as possible inside the tube. This tube is attached with an instrument that is called a spirometer. The technician monitors this and we can find the results on the screen. Residual volume. What is a residual volume? It is a volume of air remaining in the lungs after maximal exhalation. As we saw in the figure below ahead, we saw it over here. This is a residual volume. Even after expelling the air, a more total amount of air always remains in the lungs, and this is called as residual volume. Exchange of gases. Alveoli are the primary sites of exchange of gases. Exchange of gases also occur between blood and tissues. Oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged in these sites by simple diffusion, which is mainly based on pressure concentration gradient. The solubility of the gases as well as of the thickness of the membranes involved in diffusion also plays a very important role in the process of diffusion. So alveolus is a place of exchange of gases. When the concentration of oxygen is more over here, easily diffusion will take place into the blood. And these are the blood which is rich in carbon dioxide, and therefore easily, because of the change in concentration, carbon dioxide will enter into the alveoli. So this is a place of exchange of gases. Now oxygen moves inside the blood and it enters into the pulmonary vein and reaches to the left part of the heart, that is the left atrium, left ventricle, and then to the whole of the body. Again, this is a place of body tissues where exchange of gases again takes place. The blood that is rich in oxygen diffuses oxygen inside the tissue. Inside the tissue, the process of respiration takes place, during which carbon dioxide is produced as a waste. It diffuses inside the blood, then reaches back to the heart, from where it is on the right side of the heart, and again it enters to the through the pulmonary artery to the alveoli. So diffusion takes place at two places, between the alveoli and the blood capillaries, and between the body tissues and the blood capillaries over here. The solubility of carbon dioxide is 20 to 25 times higher than that of oxygen. As I said earlier, 4% of oxygen dissolves in water. In the same way, 20 to 25 times more carbon dioxide dissolves in water. The total thickness of membrane also helps in the process of diffusion. The capillary is 1 cell thick, and even the alveoli is 1 cell thick. All these factors in our body are favorable for diffusion of oxygen from alveoli to tissues and that of carbon dioxide from tissues to alveoli. So you can see this is the alveoli surface. It is only 1 cell thick. This is a capillary. It is again 1 cell thick. So this thickness is so less that easily diffusion of gases can take place between the alveolus and the blood capillary. Oxygen can enter into the blood, and carbon dioxide from the blood can easily enter into the alveolus. Transport of gases. Blood is a medium of transport of both oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen is transported by the cells. Which cells? Red blood cells. And 3% of oxygen is only carried in the dissolved state. Carbon dioxide, majority of it is carried as a bicarbonate. 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is transported by RBCs, and 7% of carbon dioxide is carried in a dissolved state in the plasma. How oxygen gets attached to RBC? RBC have got a pigment that is called as hemoglobin, and it is a red color pigment. Oxygen easily binds to this hemoglobin and it forms oxyhemoglobin. As it reaches to the tissue, it will easily give away oxygen to the cells. Each hemoglobin molecule can carry a maximum of 4 molecules of oxygen. Certain disorders of respiratory system, and these are some extra knowledge that I am giving you. One is asthma. What happens during the asthma? It is a condition in which a person's airways becomes inflamed, narrow, and swells, and they produce extra mucus, which makes it difficult to breathe. So you can see the asthmatic lungs, how the ducts look like. Here the layer of mucus is very thin, and you can see the yellow color mucus, it is very thick. And also you can see the size of the lumen over here, it is more, and the size of lumen is very less. Another type of disorder is called as emphysema, and it is a chronic disorder in which the alveolar walls are damaged, due to which the respiratory surface is decreased. You can see they are collapsed over here. One of the major causes of this is cigarette smoking. Occupational respiratory disorders. There are people who work in stone breaking industries. Dust is continuously produced and enters inside their body. Long exposure can give rise to inflammation, leading to fibrosis and thus causing serious lung damage. Workers in such industries should wear protective masks. Thank you so much. See you in the next session.